In a world beset with wars founded on dubious motives, why not consult the opinions of proven war criminals on diplomacy? Hello there, you 6 million awakening wonders. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful voyage. Remember, we stream live every single day at these times on Rumble. Join us there, and these videos are always up on Rumble first. Partly what I'm trying to do is drive you over to Rumble. Have I got a story for you today, though? So, you remember that masterclass that George W. Bush did where he repositioned himself as some old lovely old watercolourist grandfather cuddle duck?
All right, I'm gonna do another flower.
Well, now Condoleezza Rice and Madeleine Albright are similarly being repositioned as diplomats and statespeople. And at a time where there is a war between Russia and Ukraine, where that pipeline's getting blown up, where we query the motives behind the war, where of course we accept that Putin seems like a crazy, despotic individual, but still have questions about the motives of our own nations. Broadly, people that were prominent and culpable during a period of American foreign policy that was really dubious and brings up a lot of questions about the nature of war, the nature of government, and what these figures really represent. Particularly as on this channel, we continually discuss with you how trustworthy politicians are. And the idea that there's this cycle where 1 minute they're in a position where they're killing children, or at least making decisions that lead to the death of children, and then the next they're just sort of smiling and throwing their heads back, laughing about how they can be good role models and making it all about, like, you know, women getting to the top like it's 9 to 5 with Dolly Parton. It's not 9 to 5, is it? It's not women in the workplace. It's women killing Iraqi children. It just seems to me that we're framing our reality incorrectly. Just to let you know, I'm a father of daughters. I want women to have good pathways to power, self-fulfillment, self-realization in every way imaginable. But I feel it's more of a priority to have a culture and sets of systems that are representative of our highest set of values and principles, rather than, oh, just chuck a few women into this warmongering. Before we get into this masterclass video with Condoleezza Rice and Madeleine Albright, both prominent statespeople during the Clinton and Bush era respectively, let me give you a little more detail about what they achieved in office. Firstly, Condoleezza Rice. In her roles as National Security Advisor and Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice, along with the rest of the Bush administration, created an imaginary scenario that Iraq and Saddam Hussein were responsible for the attacks on the World Trade Centers in New York City on 9/11. Imagine if it was like Saddam Hussein's fault that happened. Yeah, we'd have to go there and kill him. Well, should we say he did? Yeah. It's nothing to do with it. It was no connection. We might as well have invaded Iceland or like wherever it is that Moana lived. This led the US into the illegal invasion of Iraq, killed millions of innocent Iraqis along with over 4,000 US soldiers. Condi approved numerous war crimes on behalf of the Bush administration using visions of mushroom clouds and other scare tactics. She also allowed torture to displace diplomacy as the hallmark of US foreign policy. Employing circuitous logic and Nixonian explanations, Rice recently explained away our misunderstandings about torture and international obligations by saying, by definition, if it was authorised by the President, it did not violate our obligations in the Convention Against Torture. That's the distillation of the idea that if the American government does it, then it's okay that they did it. And I suppose that that's a violation of any kind of principle, because it means that the principles themselves are irrelevant. It's just whatever you need to do in order to achieve your objective becomes the dominating idea. And if that was the dominant idea then, who's to say it's not the dominant idea now? How are we supposed to say, oh, there's no way they would destroy that pipeline, that would just be wrong? But they did do that whole war based on a lie, right? So that's Condoleezza Rice. Albright played a central role in America's foreign policy in the 90s, first as United Nations ambassador, then as Secretary of State under President Bill Clinton. That period of history and its consequences for the war on terror can't be understood without understanding her actions. In particular, Albright spearheaded Clinton's disastrous stance towards Iraq. Albright's approach was both vicious in its own right and helped lay the foundation for the 2003 Iraq War. It was already vicious, and then let's push it a notch further with war. In the context of the ongoing claims that the US and NATO are leading a worldwide campaign against Russian war crimes in Ukraine, the celebration of Albright's bloody record is a demonstration of grotesque hypocrisy. Albright was an advocate and apologist for much more brutal actions than any taken so far by Vladimir Putin in Ukraine. We've got very short-term memory in some sense. In some areas of culture, revisiting the past to analyse the attitudes that were at play then is considered necessary. But in a military and geopolitical context, it's only 20 years ago that ideas and beliefs were being used to underwrite military action that were proven to be false, and we're pretending that that sort of didn't happen. Don't you feel like you're in some giddying kind of illusion that doesn't make sense, that history is all speeding up and you can't situate yourself in it anymore? You're being told that things that happened only 20 or 30 years ago are irrelevant now.
Sometimes diplomacy is downright hard. You're dealing with people that you'd really rather not be dealing with.
I haven't seen you lose it ever.
Diplomacy. That's where we make it look good that we killed those children. Look at the presentation of it. You know what this will be about? It'll be framed as these two women achieve success in a male-dominated environment. And if you take that in isolation, that is a sort of good thing, I suppose. But when it's stacked up against illegal wars and torture and death and lies and the suffering of the American population and the service people that gave their lives, the idea that these people, guess what? They've both got boobs. That doesn't seem like enough of a good... That's good. That's really good. Here's some dead children. I'm not as interested now in the boobs. And here's some people that were tortured in Guantanamo. Yeah, the boobs are almost at this point irrelevant. You can't be distracted by highly contextual successes like improvements in gender relations, even though those things are important when they are contrasted with genocide, for example.
My relationship with Madeleine Albright goes well back before either of us was Secretary of State. I was a failed piano major at the University of Denver. I was about to end up teaching 13-year-olds to murder Beethoven.
But then I decided to murder 13-year-olds for a living. We took Beethoven out of the picture altogether, and the pianos. We could have dropped pianos on Baghdad and killed 13-year-olds, but in the end we went with bombs just because Raytheon don't make pianos.
And I wandered into a course in international politics taught by a man named Joseph Corbell. He was Madeleine's father. He opened up the world to me of things diplomatic.
It's a pretty amazing story that this refugee diplomat basically trained 2 women secretaries of state.
Believe me, I'm fully behind the empowerment of individuals from all backgrounds and of all identities and genders. I think that is a good thing. I think an inclusive, loving society is great. But I don't think using those ideas to mask unnecessary wars, resource wars, the death of American service personnel, lying is... Don't just march that to the front. Look at this. This is a story against 2 women who, against the odds, killed some Iraqi children. It's not Thelma and Louise, is it? Thelma and Louise, way to go, Thelma, way to go. They didn't, at the end of that film, drive that car into a school playground and run over a lot of innocent children, did they? They killed themselves. It was a self-sacrifice. Look, Thelma and Louise isn't the issue here. What I'm saying is, look at how we're being invited to view this as a success. 1 Republican, 1 Democrat, 2 women, sisters, coming together, showing the establishment what's what. Don't matter. We may be women, but we can torture people in Guantanamo Bay if we want. If we want to bomb innocent children, or if we want policies that will lead to the starvation of 500,000 Iraqi people, you go, girl! It's not Lizzo twerking with a flute. It's children starving to death.
When I found out she was a Republican, I said, Condi, how could you be? We have the same father.
And then we decided it doesn't ultimately matter because the same policies will be pursued regardless of which administration is in power, and we're all funded by the same people. So we overcame the differences and we did this video. All bomb kids together at the end of the day. You can wear a blue shirt, red shirt. If you're an Iraqi kid, your shirt's going to end up red. This is an amazing, full of advice that can be used in everyday life. Say, for example, you need to get some energy resources from your next door neighbor. Be willing to starve those to death and then just say it's necessary and it don't matter because they're from a foreign place.
Finding common ground, working with people who are different. Those are skills that you can use in everyday life in whatever you do.
It ain't relevant also. The skills required to be a person operating at that level of government ain't going to apply if you're running like a bicycle shop or a cafe somewhere, because those are skills that are backed by state power and the potential for monumental and monstrous violence. That's the nature of that power. That's the point of that power. I really enjoy this guy's videos. He's brilliant, isn't he? But wouldn't you like even more of him? As you know, we are streaming every day on Rumble at these times. Now, if you are a fan of our podcast, Under the Skin, you've got to become a member of Stay Free AF. That is our community where you get even more fantastic content as a member. We're creating more free content than ever and better paid for content than you could ever imagine. We've already done interviews with Vandana Shiva, Wim Hof, Gabor Mate, Noam Chomsky. Coming up, we're going to be speaking to Donald, Bernie, Elon. I'll give you the surnames once we confirm the interviews. All of these interviews will be available on Stay Free AF, as well as my stand-up special that's going to drop in December, our community film, and opportunities to join me for live events regularly throughout the year. Stay free as fuck. There's a link below to join. I should mention actually that Madeleine Albright did die last year, so God rest her eternal soul. It's not a criticism of her as an individual, it's more a critique on the vacuous, vapid, artificial, superficial, manipulative, propagandist nature of contemporary politics, where figures that participated in the large-scale annihilation and murder of innocent people can be trotted out as diplomats. Also note that it doesn't matter which team they're on, the whole thing's just a ludicrous spectacle. So the video's about that, and with all due respect to Madeleine Albright and people that are grieving her death. Perhaps the most notorious episode in Albright's career came in 1996 when she was asked on the CBS programme 60 Minutes about the deaths of 500,000 Iraqi children because of severe economic sanctions imposed on that country as part of an effort to undermine the regime of Saddam Hussein. More children had died in Iraq than Hiroshima, interviewer Leslie Stahl said. The price was worth it, Albright responded. And I suppose that's the nature of international diplomacy, is you have to be willing to sanction the death of 500,000 children and then say, it was worth it.
We think the price is worth it.
The colossal death toll among Iraqi children would be repeatedly cited by Islamic fundamentalists like Osama bin Laden as a reason for their shift from alliance with the United States during the US-backed guerrilla war against Soviet military forces in Afghanistan to targeting the US for terrorist attacks on 9/11. The US massacre of innocents became the pretext for Al-Qaeda's. Some people would say there is no objective reality, there are merely narratives that we're invited to participate in. And the narrative we're being given here is one where one patriarchal figure stewards two daughters of different hues into positions of political power, a triumph of feminism against male power. A more chronologically accurate narrative is that sanctions imposed under Clinton and Albright led to deaths in Iraq, and the cold response of Albright, it was a price worth paying, leads to Al-Qaeda mobilizing against the United States and the 9/11 attacks, which are then in turn used to attack Saddam Hussein again for something he was nothing to do with. So in the end, what you're left with is a circle jerk of bogus diplomacy, senseless, needless attacks, resource-led attacks, many people would say, on Iraq. And what at the end of it, you're asked to believe, oh, look, sisters are doing it for themselves. Albright's vociferous support of violence and regime change as US policy helped set the stage for the war that took place a few years later after she departed the government. In 1998, she expounded on America's right to bomb Iraq, proclaiming, if we have to use force, it's because we're America. We are the indispensable nation. We stand tall and we see further than other countries into the future. But remember, if you're an ordinary American person, you may not be benefiting from that hubris because you know that America is now a country in decline, and ordinary people are neglected and maligned. In a sense, when they say America, they mean American elites. And those, if you ask me, are globalist elites. So there you have it. We're invited to look at the contributions of these two women as a great achievement for their gender, a great achievement for their sex. But actually, politically, their actions led to a series of violent exchanges between America and the Middle East. Millions of people dying in Iraq unnecessarily. Attacks on America provoked by that action. Ordinary American service people losing their lives. And then a few years later, they're trotted out to talk about it as if it's a real victory for women in the workplace. I don't think this can be seen as a victory for women in the workplace unless your workplace is Guantanamo Bay or the rubble of Baghdad and the victory includes dead children. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments and let me know what you think in the chat. Have a look at either of these videos. Sign up to my mailing list so we can stay in continual contact with you. More important than any of that is that you please watch us every day on Rumble and stay free.